Joining us now, she is, of course, the architect of the Wofford program. Of course, in its 3 seasons existed here, she's been the head coach. Was a standout player at Eastern Kentucky. And as they're getting ready here before it is starting SoCon play here before you know it, I speak of head coach Chelsea Butler joining us here for the first time on In the Circle of D1 Softball, powered by 643. Coach, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk about this team now as you're getting ready for SoCon Conference. What have you learned about this group so far?
Yeah. I mean, our group is absolutely relentless in their approach to do everything, right? And I think the relentlessness stems from their love for each other. And I think it's in the first year we're actually seeing this that 1 through 20, it doesn't matter who is up or who gets the glory, who the spotlight is on. The other 19 are just so excited for them. And so I've learned a lot. And as long as we have outs to play with, this group is going to fight. And I really couldn't ask for more.
What is tell us a little bit for those that haven't followed your team on a day-to-day basis. How would you describe the identity of this team?
Yeah. We're a little bit chaotic in a good way. We run a lot. We do a lot of things to put our runners in positions to score. We don't necessarily, just stand up and, go home run for home run with other people. But truly the backing of this program is really built on our pitching and defense. And so, really the first 2 years of who we were was built on our pitching and defense. And this year, our offense has kind of taken the next step, which has been a lot of fun to be part of. And, it lets all three of those components get moving, which has been a lot of fun.
Do you feel like you mentioned this the third season? Do you feel you're on schedule where you thought you would be? Do you think you're ahead of schedule? I know that's always coaches always don't like those questions because it puts it into like, oh, where you're limiting
Yeah.
what we could do. But at the same time, as you kind of planned it out, you hope to be in a certain spot by a certain period. Or
Right.
are you close to where you want to be?
Man, I don't even know if I had a schedule, if I'm being honest with you. When you really look at this thing, year one, I didn't know what to expect. Year one of our program was year one of me as a head coach, right? And so there were a lot of things happening. And I was kind of just hoping we could win 5 games, and so you come out and you win 3 in weekend one, and we're like, well, hey, maybe we could win 10 games. Something that I don't think a lot of people even think of or remember is that our first game in program history, we were perfect gamed, right? Like we started at the very bottom of this thing. So to be where we are in years 1 and 2, and now being into year 3, I think it's really cool just to, see where we are and see the growth of the program. But as far as the schedule goes, I think we're far beyond where anyone thought we could be. But yet I think we're probably right where, team 3 believes that we should be.
Let's talk about Team Three. I think when a lot of people think of your program and your team this year going into the season, pitching was the first thing that people come up with
Yeah.
because you have talented arms. Just talk about your pitching staff with Margaret Axelson and certainly
Yep.
Abby Greenwood, are certainly the headliners there, but not the only ones.
Yeah, we had a pitching staff of 5 last year. All 5 returned this year, and we added a talented freshman into the mix. And so, yeah, it's hard when you look at do we have enough innings to go around for how talented all 6 of them are? And yet, I think between the 6 of them, if you ask them and you talk to them specifically, they're excited to watch their teammates compete, right? And so it's always a healthy competition, but it never stems from a bad place. And so I really think that, our younger ones getting to watch Margaret and Abby, who truthfully in year one, they were also the 2 that kind of, steered the ship. And, I told them from the beginning that, hey, if things are going bad, I'm not coming to get you, right? Like it is you guys, and we are going to be better for it on the other end. But we're going to have to go through some of this on the front end to make sure that, we get to be where we want to be in this. And so I think just our younger ones getting to look up to them and learn from them has been really cool.
What makes Abby and Margaret, what did you see in them when you identified them that they would
Yeah.
be the cornerstone, if you will, of this program, literally building this program?
Right. So crazy story. Abby Greenwood was committed before I took the job here. So she was coming here. And then Margaret is obviously a Division 3 transfer who was at Birmingham Southern her freshman year. And so she had a great freshman year. She was named the freshman of the year in the conference and the pitcher of the year. And obviously Birmingham Southern had some financial issues going on. They're not even a college anymore. And so, when she went in the portal, she was somebody who scholastically identified, and then somebody who was so different just in her ability to throw a drop ball. But truthfully, I had no idea. I'm looking at Margaret. She's interested in Wofford for a number of reasons. I'm looking at her as like, cool, somebody on staff will have college game experience. Let's do this thing. And so, but immediately once we got on campus, you see how they work and who they are. And, I didn't even have to kind of pinpoint anything. They made sure that the spotlight was on themselves.
For people that don't know, you have background in pitching.
Right.
You've handled the pitching staffs throughout your coaching career. What do you look for in pitch
Mm-hmm.
in a pitcher when you bring them in, and as
Yeah.
well as when you build a pitching staff?
Yeah. Gosh, everyone's so different in what we're looking for, right? When you talk about a staff, we don't want three or four who do the exact same thing. So, even if, there's two who have a great rise ball, if we already have two on staff, I'm probably going to go in a different direction. We've learned in the SoCon that having two really good pitchers gets you really far. Having three is special. And we've also learned that having a great changeup and one really, really good pitch is going to take you pretty far. And so learning that about the SoCon, I think, has kind of influenced some of the things we look for. But, I look for kids who straight up compete, right? Who it doesn't matter what the score is or what's going on. I want to see you go for it. And so I think that probably stems a little bit from my personality in itself of, kind of throwing with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, which I think has been my entire career up to this point, to be honest with you. And so I think a little bit of that, obviously, how do you handle high level travel teams on a week to week basis? Because those are going to be the kids that you face for the next 4 years and those kinds of things. But yeah, a little bit of everything, a little bit of style, a little bit of, chaoticness, I guess.
Oh, no, that's good. It makes a ton of sense. You mentioned this offense taking another step forward this
Yeah.
season. Talk about some of the players offensively that have helped you get to that next step.
Yeah, Bree Stanley, obviously incredible hitter, hits in the four hole for us, just straight power. Even when she hits balls, I'm glad I don't have to play defense when she is up to bat. River Sampson has done a great job, another sophomore for us. She's just steady Eddie. She's someone who, you kind of look at and she's not going to have the spotlight on her a ton. But when you look back in game stats and those kinds of things, we're probably not in games without her. And so you look at that. And then a couple of our seniors have really stepped up this year, which has been really cool. And Gracie Parker and Caitlin Greenwood, who obviously defensively has always been a catalyst for us, but offensively, she's done a very good job for us this year. Kate Platt, she's been riddled with injuries. The fact that her body is still allowing her to go is incredible. But she's been a great hitter since she got here. But yeah, I mean, I really think that, when you look at the entirety of a program, like the offensive system is probably the hardest thing to implement and have buy-in, 1 through 20. But us being in year 3 and having 0 staff turnover since we started this thing, which is also incredible. You're seeing we're not doing anything different or anything new, but you're just seeing the buy-in and the actual understanding of what we're asking them to do. And my associate head coach, Kara, has done a great job with that, and with them and staying patient with them right through this. And so it's just really cool to see the other side of this thing.
No, it really has, and after a tremendous start. As we record this, you got a very high RPI. I know it's super early for that stuff, but
Right.
when you're a brand new program, you don't take that for granted either. At the same time, am I
Yes.
accurate on that?
100%. It's cool. I honestly, obviously RPI hadn't come out, so it comes out for the first time. And so out of curiosity, I'm not expecting to be anywhere close to the top in this thing, but you scroll through and you look through it and I'm like, wow, man, we're on this thing, right? Like we're there. And so I think it's just really cool to see. But again, obviously, like you said, it's early in this, and we know that the longer the season goes on and, the more matchups and things there are, things happen. But I think just who we are through this first 20 games or so, it's cool to be recognized in that way.
No doubt, highest RPI in the conference. I mean, it's steps that
Yeah.
get the name out there, get the word out there for the program.
Yep.
There. Before we talk about the program, I want to talk about you because your journey is fascinating to me. You played at Eastern Kentucky, so let's start with your playing career.
Yeah.
What got you into playing softball?
Um, my dad, I am the only child, and I am probably, I am the daughter that he wishes was a son. So I think from the very beginning, sports were going to be part of who I was. And he always tells a story that I was, like 3 years old I had a stick in my hand and he threw a milk carton at me and I hit it. And that was just going to be what it was, I think, from that point. And so, played all my life. Obviously, I started pitching when I was 10. I have no idea why they allowed me to continue pitching because I was terrible until I was like 15. But from that, I played at Golden West Junior College in Huntington Beach for 2 years. And then I transferred to Eastern Kentucky and finished my career there.
Now that was my next question. How does a West Coast kid end up at Eastern Kentucky?
I wish I knew. Uh, you know, I have no idea. When I decided to go to Eastern Kentucky, I probably couldn't have even pinpointed where Kentucky was on a map. But I remember the first conversation I had was with my then assistant coach at Eastern, and she was also from a junior college in Northern California and had stayed. And so she just spoke on, you know, not really similarities between California and Kentucky because there really aren't any, but at the same time, just, the type of life and what you're going to get out of, your education and playing experience at Eastern with Coach Worthington. And truly, I think we talked for like an hour and a half and majority of it was anything but softball. And I knew I was going there before I stepped on campus.
But sometimes it's meant to be on there. How would you describe yourself as a player?
Yeah, I was a little bit feisty. I was who I was, left-handed pitcher. I think to be a pitcher in itself, you have to be a little bit crazy. If you're a left-handed pitcher, you're probably a little bit crazier. It's just, part of who you are, what you do. Um, but I was pretty middle of the road in everything, right? Like if I got too fired up or I dropped down too low, I wasn't going to be very good. Relied a lot on swings and misses and those kinds of things. But um, I really think that who I am now as a coach kind of reflects who I was. And just that, there really isn't, again, if I get too high in this thing, like, my players are going to freak out. I'm not going to be any good for this team and those kinds of things.
Okay, so with Coach Butler then and then Butler the player, if you both are in the same room, you get along, right? No
Yeah, we
clashes.
get along. Yeah, no, we get along.
So you play at Eastern Kentucky, have a standout career there. You start coaching. You start at Eastern Kentucky, makes sense. Obviously, right there, get the first opportunity. Here are some of the highlights of places you've been for people that don't know. You've coached Utah State. You've coached at Temple, Presbyterian, Incarnate Word, and then Maryland, where I think certainly a lot of people started taking notice about your career. Before we get to the Maryland part, talk about the journey of coaching. And again, I'm probably missing a couple other landing spots there,
Yeah.
but just talk about this journey because you've paid your dues here. You've coached and you've stayed with it. Whereas a lot of people might say, maybe this is not for me, but you stayed with it. You've coached at all these different. Talk about this journey and why you stuck with it and what was it that really got you hooked on coaching.
Yeah. My first few years at Eastern, which is crazy to think about and how far our sport has come, I made $6,000 a year. And so again, I think that's just really reflective of my entire career up to this point and, what it was going to take to get here. But, I think the reason that I never gave it up and I didn't give up was because of the work that I had to put in early. And so I was going to see it through and I was going to see it to the other side of this thing. But it is a journey, right? And it is unique in itself. But I am who I am because of it. I was an assistant at the mid-major level for 10 years before I got a shot, Power Five, which now Power Four, obviously. But I wouldn't change it for anything. I had early on, I'd probably say like between years 6 and 10, I had a few mid-major opportunities open up as far as, moving up head coach opportunities, but I wouldn't have been ready. Hindsight's 2020 in this thing, but I'm glad I waited 13 years before I took my first head job. I saw everything good and bad in between, things I would do, things I wouldn't do. And I watched this sport change and I watched the landscape of it change. And so, I think me, obviously, I guess I was 35 when I took this job at Wofford, 34 maybe. And so I really think that, the maturity in itself of who I was going to be for my team and what I wanted to be for my players, certainly age helped that.
Tell me how Maryland maybe got you to this point, because maybe without the Maryland job and the job you did, because you did a great job. You don't just get the job and then not do well and get the head coaching job. You did a great job to the point where you became a focal point as Wofford. Talk about how that changed you and got you where you are today.
Oh, it changed everything. I can't speak enough about, Mark Montgomery, who gave me a chance at Maryland. Because at that point I was just a mid-major name, right? And I had to jump around and those kinds of things. And, obviously when I was at Temple, they eliminated the program in the year I was there. And so my experience is just different, from the jump of it. But, I mean, being at Maryland, obviously you're playing opponents daily that, are top 25 and those kinds of things. And Maryland was in a point of trying to rebuild and trying to re-identify and compete and those kinds of things. And so I truly can't speak enough to how grateful I am for my 3 years at Maryland, and the belief that people around me had in me to do a good job.
No doubt about that. Because you mentioned, I remember Temple. That's where I first heard of you.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was Temple because I followed the program there and that story until it kind of came to a deal. So let's talk about now how you and Wofford meet up. This is a
Yeah.
brand new program they're starting up from scratch.
Hmm.
Talk to me about how that process began, how it played out,
Yeah.
what intrigued you about it, because that's a big burden to take start a program from scratch, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about big burden. Ignorance is bliss, man. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Um, so that was awesome in itself. But again, obviously I had been at Presbyterian for a few years. My best friend lives in Simpsonville, which is 35 minutes away from Wofford. And, she has two babies and the young one is my goddaughter. And so those were kind of things that, that Wofford itself specifically, just location, it was somewhere where I would want to be forever. Right. And so that was a big deal. But yeah, it was very small world. Just one of my really good friends in softball, her mom's also in softball, had been talking to Mark Line, who is still on my staff. I'm lucky he's on my staff, but he's the one who he was an associate athletic director here, and then started the softball program here. They had talked, and so she had gotten him and I in contact, and it honestly never felt like an interview. There were just conversations we had. I got to come down here and visit, obviously before the field was even built or anything. Before preseason of my last year at Maryland, I got to come down here and, talk with Coach Line and those kinds of things. But it never felt like an interview. It felt like a continuing conversation that, truthfully, I mean, the Lord aligned my steps and I was right where I was meant to be.
Meant to be. So you get the job.
Yep.
Take me through the process. What was the first thing you did? Because I've had Coach Rittman on, who obviously built the Clemson program from
Yeah.
scratch, and he told me from the because I from the beginning, he's like, a lot of people don't realize a lot of the hard stuff is before you even get on the field, before you even play that first game. So take me through that process. You get the job. Okay, I got to build this program. So take
Yeah.
us now. You're trying to figure this out. So take me through those steps. And what was one of the first things you did?
Yeah, there were a couple people, it was before it was announced, but a couple people had like started to find out and those kinds of things that this was probably happening. And so one of the very first things I did was I actually talked to Kara, my associate head coach, on the phone, who was a volunteer at Ole Miss at the time, because of a travel ball coach in our area. And he had reached out and said, hey, she had played for him, and he was like, hey, I think she's going to be looking to get closer to home. She'd be somebody great to talk to. And I was like, cool, I'll do it. After I got off the phone with her, I mean, I hadn't even moved from Maryland yet. I was still in Maryland. I was on the phone with her and I was like, cool, I think I have my assistant coach. Like, now let's get on to the next thing. And so there was no like real order of steps. If I had to try and like take you through a timeline and what it looked like, we'd be doing loops and spins and be all over the place. Because man, I don't know if I took a breath until probably 10 months in. But yeah, so I got here. I think I had been here for 2 days. I went to a camp. I worked a camp. Didn't know what I was looking at or what I was doing, what city I was even in. But I ended up finding our 24 pitcher, Natalia Salo, at that camp. Had to wait a year to be able to contact her. So that was one of the first things I did, which is kind of crazy. But from there, we had 8 that were coming in that first year, that year 0. I had brought one in from the portal. And so we had 9 in year 0 when we didn't play. And we just recruited our butts off, man. Wofford's a unique place in the fact that you can't stack scholarships. So your athletic or academic money, we cost, well, now I think that my first year we were close to 75. and it's high academic demand. So we recruit in a pretty small pond to begin with. And so you're trying to find people kind of late in the game that are willing to take a chance on you in something that doesn't exist, right? And willing to take a chance on me who has zero head coaching experience, right? And so there's all these pieces that go into it. And so, um, man, we recruited like crazy. I can't even tell you how many visits we did, but we got the ones we needed to get this thing started. And we kept going. I got out to the field the first day and I was like, dude, we don't even have a ball or a tee. Like we don't have anything. And so you realize, again, for all things I knew to expect, there were probably 3 times as many that I was like, uh-oh, here we go. But yeah, one day at a time, right?
One day is definitely at a time there, for sure. Did you lean on any head coaches for advice as you were kind of going through this? I was curious I don't know if you reached out to a Coach Rittman who built it or just people you know. Was there people you leaned on as you were beginning this process?
Yeah, I would say the most was Jane Worthington at Eastern. I could call her at 2 in the morning. She might be annoyed with me, but she's going to pick up the phone. And so there were a lot of conversations there, because she started the program at Eastern, right? And she's the only head coach in program history at Eastern Kentucky. And
Right.
so, yeah, I was done, in the early 90s versus now. But at the same time, I think those experiences are unique to the people who start programs regardless of when it happens.
You mentioned it earlier. You have your original staff, basically, and you
Yeah.
mentioned you already highlighted one. Take me through each individual that you
Yep.
decided and why you felt they were the right person for your staff in this program. Clearly, it is because you all have the same vision, and that's been proven by how you've stayed together. But just talk about each individual and how you were able to find them and why you thought they were the perfect fit.
Yeah. So Coach Line, obviously, he's the one who hired me technically. Asked him to stay on staff that first year. And I haven't been able to, I've been able to convince him every year after that to stay on. I think his wife is probably sick of me. She is ready for that, vacation retirement life. But he's been at Wofford in the 80s, since the 80s. He was hired as the baseball coach originally, saw himself in a number of different roles here, ending as high as associate athletic director before starting softball. And so we're a total student body of 1,800 students. We don't have graduate programs, right? We're an undergraduate college only. And so, in small environments, obviously, there's a unique process to everything, right? And so having Coach Line was really important for the 8 girls who believed in him to begin with to start this thing when there really was nothing. But then also just, who he is as a human being around this campus. And everyone loves him. He's the only person in my life that I've ever met where I've never met somebody who has a bad thing to say about him, which I think just, shows one, his character, but two, just how much he loves this place. So we've been lucky to keep him on staff. And then Kara Shutt, one of my associate head coaches, my first conversation. Honestly, I don't even know, like, if I think back, I don't even know what I was looking for. I needed somebody who was going to be able to run an offense in its entirety, right? I understand that offense is important to this thing, but that is not my style, right? Like I would rather be on the field for 4 hours pitching and defense only, call it good. But at the same time, obviously we know that can't happen. And so I talked with Kara. I felt like our personalities matched up pretty well in this, and I was taking a chance on her as much as she was taking a chance on me. And so that I think was just a really easy fit. And then with Taylor, my other associate head coach, I actually coached her first 3 years at Maryland. And so my first year here at Wofford was her senior year at Maryland. And then I convinced her to, come back and join me here at Wofford. And so I think that has to show a little something that, I got to be a decent enough person that she wants to continue to hang out with me every day. But she does a great job defensively, runs our entire defense. Another young great mind. And I always tell everyone that, and probably being on this podcast might hurt me a little here, but once people realize how great she is, I'm not going to be able to keep her. But she's special in what she does and the connection she has with the girls. And so, we run this thing the same way we run everything else, like a family. To me, it's if I see them at 10 in the morning, cool. If I don't see them until lunch, also totally cool, as long as they're getting their work done, which they always do. They always show up for the girls. And, I really am blessed.
What was the most favorite fun thing during this process as you're building the program before you even play a game? What was the most fun part? What was the most stressful part?
Yeah. I think the most stressful part for me personally was am I ready to be a head coach? Right. And so every day there was that thought. And as we got closer and closer to game day, man, it just got bigger. And it was, can I do this? Am I doing the right things? Right. And am I preparing us in a way that's, not just good enough for now, but going to be good enough to sustain success? And then you get perfect game your first game and you have all those doubts of, yeah, maybe I should just go back to being a pitching coach. But that lasted shortly, which was nice. I think just the most fun of this whole thing is before we even started a game, right, is we had 23 people who believed enough in us to take a chance on this thing, right? When I would say more than half of them said yes to before a field was built. And so they said yes to a dream. And so I am going to be so grateful to those early groups forever. Their parents to saying yes to something that doesn't exist, right? And whether those kids decided to stay in our program or decided to find a better fit, I'm always going to be so grateful to them for even saying yes and taking a chance on this thing.
Facilities, you mentioned the stadium. Take me through
Yeah.
the process of this stadium, because I think now that people have taken aware, especially if they watch the games on ESPN Plus, they see what a beautiful facility it is, what a beautiful stadium it is. My colleague Justin McLeod, I know, has covered games there, has written about it for D1 softball. Just take us through the process of building those facilities in that stadium, because that's also probably a big part of your pitch there and helped you through in building this program.
Yeah, so the stadium was already completely drawn up and planned before I even said yes to this. But when you look at when Wofford decided to start softball, they didn't just say, hey, we're going to start softball, best of luck. They said, hey, we're going to start softball and we're going to give you the resources to be successful. Right. And so from that point, it was my job to make sure that we could be successful. But our facility is incredible. I think it really speaks to the people of Wofford from the beginning to the day to day, right? Like there's always somebody out working on our field. There's always somebody out making sure it's clean, making sure it's nice, taking care of us in ways that people don't have to, right? I've been on enough college campuses to realize that what we have here at Wofford is so rare. I promise it'll make it really hard for me to ever say yes to leaving this place because of how rare it really is inside of this small community that we have. But again, from the beginning, it was done right. It was beautiful. I know Coach Line spent a lot of time in that. The year before I was hired, he talked to Coach Rittman. He talked to a lot of coaches of, Coach Hawkins at Upstate, just things that we would want to do, not want to do, what would be important to have and all of those things. And so I know that Coach Line is, so grateful for the support he had from other coaches in our industry to just be willing to help. But yeah, we are very fortunate.
I know as coaches, you're always focused on the game in hand and everything like that. But did you allow yourself to take it all in that first season, either in the first home game or the second game? Did you allow yourself to take it all in, like, wow, this whole hard work is working out, or were you just too locked in?
Yeah. I don't know if locked in is right, but no, I didn't get to appreciate it. I think the first time that I really got to reflect for more than, a second was being named SoCon Coach of the Year in 24. I think that moment in itself was kind of like the deep breath of, okay, we're doing the right things. Because yeah, it's a Coach of the Year award, but it's a Staff of the Year award, right? Like we know that. But up until that point, I don't think that I had ever really taken a deep breath of just like, damn, man, we did this.
Were you surprised when you got the word you got that award?
Yeah, I cried. Yeah, real tears. And so it was really funny because our SID at the time, it was like total anticlimactic in it. He sent it was just a screenshot of, we had Margaret was on first team and then we had 3 who were on the all freshman team in our first year. And so that's where it was cut off. And so then his next text said, and congrats on being named Coach of the Year. And I was like, wait, what? And so yeah, it was, just really cool in itself. But yeah, I definitely cried.
Yeah, but it was well earned, because a lot of people wondered, well, they're probably going to be a gimme for like the teams in the league and all that. But that turned out it was not accurate at all. You were right in the mix. You're right there, competitive, right in the league, near the top of the league, conference wise. And then last year they carried over to last year when you won 30 games there in the SoCon. Which I think, again, now to the point where you're trying to be contenders for the conference championship this season. What have you learned about the SoCon now here as you enter your 3rd season?
Yeah, SoCon's tough. I think what I've learned the most is that preseason, obviously preseason is important, but preseason records matter very little once we get into SoCon, right? And every game can be anybody's. We know everyone's going to come out swinging, and we got to, be ready to take, a punch to the mouth, but also be ready to punch back. And truly 1 through 8, including ourselves, obviously there's, any game is anyone's any given day. And there's really not a game off that you're going to get to take, in SoCon. And so, I do think it's a great softball conference. But yeah, it's a dogfight every game, and we're looking forward to getting into it.
Was there a moment or a game, maybe in the first season, where you're like, yeah, we are doing it. This is going well. We're in the right direction here. This is exactly like I envisioned it. Was there that moment there where you're like, because you were talking about, you had some doubt, like,
Yeah.
but there had to be a moment too where there was that turning point where you're like, okay, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we won our 20th game. It was a midweek, and I don't even remember who we played. But that first year, we were really bad at midweeks. I don't know why. But it was our final midweek of the season. We won our 20th game, and it was one of those of like, dang, we won 20 games in year one, right? And so, we were close to the end of season, but that was a big moment. Winning our first game, SoCon tournament was a big moment. It was in 10 innings, and the girls kept fighting, they kept going. And so there were definitely a couple moments where it was very clear that, we had this thing on the right track.
How are you a different coach today than you were 3 years ago when you took
Yeah.
over this program? What have you learned on the job?
Yeah. I think that year to year, as things change, like you take less personal, and you realize, that, everyone wants what's best for themselves, right? Every player does. And so when you could find a group of people who are willing to want what's best for themselves, but also want what's best for the person next to them, special things are going to happen. But again, I think I take less personal now. I've become more confident in my ability to be a head coach, right? And so, I let obviously Kara and Taylor lead a lot and do what they're very good at. And so I think that's special to who we are. But yeah, it's funny. The other day, our girls were getting ready to play catch, and so they'd already stretched and everything. And our photographer was out there taking pictures, right? And so 5 or 6 of them stop, they smile, they take a picture, whatever. And I look at Karen and Taylor both next to me, and I'm like, dang, I've changed in the last 6 years, because that would have made me mad a few years ago, right? Of how dare you not be focused? But you realize that that has nothing to do with focus. That has to do with your kids having a good time, being there, enjoying their time at practice. And if they're enjoying their time, I'm enjoying my time. And, not everything has to always be so serious, I think is probably the biggest thing of, letting their personalities be their personalities, and, letting them always feel safe to express themselves and be their true selves.
Well, and that's the key. You got the players, you have to see what their personalities are, and if they need to be loose, let them be loose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get the most out of them. A lot of coaches don't figure that out until a long time. You kind of figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah, blessed, lucky in that, I think, in a few ways. But again, I really think it's them. It's our group of kids, right? And who they are on and off the field. And I know off the field, man, they are incredible human beings, great softball players, better humans who are going to do so much with their lives. And truly, it's I think probably a lot of coaches say this, but I just with Team 3, man, I can't imagine another team being more special or holding more in my heart for just who they've been to this.
Clearly, I could tell your voice. They mean a lot. I'm curious, what have you learned from them? I'm wondering if there was things you've
Yeah.
learned from your players that you're like, man, I wish when I was a player, I was more like I would have had that what they have.
Yeah. Um, Truly their ability to just go, let things roll off their back, right? We learned early on with this team that we lost early on game, like opening weekend to IUND, I think, and it was one of those. It was our first game of the day, and so one of my big message to them has been the power's in the response, right? So whatever happens in game one, the power's in your response of who are you going to be in game two. And one of our captains, she said to me in our captains meeting was, the mutual respect that was felt in that for us to just be able to take care of it really meant a lot. And so I think that in itself of just, I don't have to get on them, right? Like when they mess up, they know they messed up. They feel worse than I can make them feel. And so it's like, why even be that person? And so I think that this team has allowed me to be more free and have more fun. I would think I truly believe that if you ask any of the returners from last year, they would say that I have a lot more fun. And so I'm grateful to them for that experience as well.
Describe the coaches in the league. You mentioned it. They get you won Coach of the Year. They voted for you, so you got their instant respect, which means a lot because you got some legendary coaches in the league, like a
Yeah.
Coach Reed at Chattanooga. You're going to open with, who's on the D1 softball all-quarter century best mid-major head coaches for the job he's done at Chattanooga, among others. Just talk about the coaches in the league and getting to know them. I know you're all competitors, but you
Yeah.
also want what's best for the league and for each other in that regard is at the same time.
Yeah, and we have a couple new coaches this year, so I don't know them as well yet. But when I first came in to the conference and to Wofford, I had a message on Twitter from Lindsay Fico, who's now at Florida Gulf Coast, who was at Mercer, and it had her cell phone number. It said, "Hey, I'm here if you need anything. I know what it's like to be the new guy." And so I think from that alone, I felt just immediate support and immediate respect, right? And then obviously we do have legendary coaches and Coach Reed and Coach Brenneman at UNCG, right? And Coach Brenneman, she's been wonderful to me, right? Every time she texts me, I'm like, okay, I got a text from Janelle, let's go, that kind of thing. And she's a fierce competitor, right? And on the field, you would have no idea that we were friends. But then when you're out recruiting and it's like I get to sit there and spend an hour and a half with her, there's no one else I'd rather be hanging out with in that moment, right? And so I think there's that good balance of, being opponents and being competitors, but also being respectful and respecting each other, respecting the game, I think is really important, which is something I think the SoCon does really well.
In a lot of ways, this conference is a good fit. Like you talked about having that chip on your shoulder, because I feel
Yeah.
like you as a conference have a chip on the shoulder. Because last year, for example, you were a top 10 league in the RPI
Yeah.
conferences, and you've gotten winning teams that have competed very well and beaten teams. Like Mercer is a great example, getting to the regional final last year with
Yeah.
Coach Fico there, beating everybody in the state of Georgia as an example of that.
Yeah.
Chattanooga, I saw them in Tallahassee give Florida State all they can handle in person a couple years ago. Do y'all talk about that, getting that respect that maybe you're not getting from certain aspects of the softball community that you certainly deserve with the league that you've had and the programs you have in the league?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much as just open conversation throughout, the league and stuff, but I think in those side conversations, talking with Coach Cliff from Western fall recruiting, he mentioned, that last year was the first time that since he's been in the conference, and obviously he's done a phenomenal job at Western in the years that he's been there. He's talked about, how last year was the first year that 1 through 8, I think that there were 7 of us who finished with 30 wins or 6 of us who ended up finishing 30 plus wins. And so I think just speaking to the growth of the conference and, certainly he's seen it change and those kinds of things. But I think those are the conversations more so of just where we're going as a conference. And I think respect from other people comes along the way with those things.
Let's talk about the outlook of the league over as a big picture. This feels as wide open as you mentioned it as ever, top to bottom with the league, where I don't think there's a big gap. So just talk about what you've been able to see as you follow closely with this league this year. Sanford's played a very difficult schedule, so their win-loss record's a little misleading there because of the schedule they've played. But then you've got Chattanooga with a lot of new faces there, Greensboro. Just talk about this league as a whole as it gets going.
Yeah. I think our conference, I think once we get going, you're going to see how strong it is. Right. And similar to those things of Sanford schedules, man, when you look at their players and their athletes, you look at their returners and what they've done, dude, they're good. Like they are dogs. Right. And so again, I think there's a few records who are probably not reflective of who they are and what they're capable of, especially in SoCon play. But again, I think that this year will be similar to last year. I expect us to, still finish within that top 10 just based on the league and who does what and those kinds of things. And I also think it's interesting that our style of play 1 through 8, we're also different in what we do and how we win games, right? And I tell our team all the time, winning's hard. Finding different ways to win is even harder. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to see, kind of how it all shakes out and how people are winning games.
Describe the conference championship tournament, because that's one that I always have to circle every year.
Yep.
Because it's never boring. It's always unpredictable. Yeah. It's crazy. Like last year was another example of that with Mercer doubling up Chattanooga there to win the tournament. Just describe as being a part of it. What is it like? And now that your group has kind of felt that experience, What's it like in that conference tournament?
Yeah, all bets are off, right? I think that's the coolest part about it is that you go into a third part of your season 0-0, and really you're fighting to make it to Saturday. And so it's one game at a time, but it's also, I think you see a different passion come out even then, and kind of, I think it reinvigorates everyone in a way, but it also just it goes to show you, man, that you can't bet on anything, you can't circle anything. It's just a dogfight.
Has there been talk about the format or the location? Is everybody pretty pleased, or is there some discussions of maybe tweaking it?
Yeah, well, with Tennessee Tech adding next year, I do believe it is changing. I couldn't tell you what the exact format is. I know I've received something, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head of what the format is. And then right now, you could put in a bid to host. So I know in the last 3 years, our first conference tournament was at UNCG. Last year, we hosted conference tournament. This year, we're going to UNC Greensboro, or we're going to Chat this year for a tournament. And so I don't know if anyone else will put in a bid, but I think it's nice to rotate and not continue to be in one spot.
What was the experience like hosting?
Man, it was so cool and so disappointing, right? Because we went 0-2 in front of our own fans. But I think just Spartanburg itself is such a cool city, that I think it's overlooked a lot because it's grown so much in the last 10 years, right? 15 years ago, you wouldn't want to be in Spartanburg. And so hosting it was cool. Our kids getting to sleep in their own beds was cool, obviously. Them still get to go to class and those kinds of things. But it was really cool, and it was exciting to get to host.
What's one thing you maybe will take away from that the next time you host? I'm not even talking about on the field, but
Yeah.
just as being a host, as being the host coach, if you will, for the tournament.
Right. I think, once you do it once, you kind of, what to expect a little bit more, right? And so truthfully for me, last year, Janelle was, a blessing to me of like, hey, make sure SoCon has extra game balls, make sure that this happens, right? Like this has happened when we're hosting, those kinds of things. And so just to have that knowledge going into it next time. But also I think who we are as a team obviously will be different the next time we get to host. Just in that it's cool to get to be at home, but it also feels less business like sometimes because, our girls were still going to class in the morning. And, if they had a game off and they needed to get to class and those kinds of things. And so we'll have to figure out how to maneuver that. But, because our school calendar is so delayed in itself that when we get back from conference tournament is when we're starting finals. And so it's just unique in itself. So finding a way to kind of manage both, but also feeling like it's a standard business trip, I think we'll all feel much more prepared.
Last thing before I let you go, because you've been awesome. We could do hours otherwise, but
Yeah.
as you get going in conference play, what are going to be some keys for your team and maybe some things you want to see improve or address that will be the difference here in accomplishing
Yeah.
your eternal goals?
Yeah. I think staying true to ourselves, right? And our brand of softball. And so doing those little things, staying aggressive even in situations where it maybe looks like we shouldn't be aggressive, right? Because that's been a huge part of who we are, and stealing those extra bases and doing those kinds of things. And not feeling the pressure because all of a sudden it's SoCon. I think that obviously we are built on our pitching and defense. We need our pitching to continue to take strides forward with this new era of our offense, and just allow them to continue to be themselves. But I think we have all the pieces, all the players, everything we could need right within the 20 of them. And so now it's just a matter of, letting them love softball and continue on this journey together.
That is Wofford head coach Chelsea Butler joining us here on In the Circle of D1 Softball, powered by 643. Coach, pleasure to meet you. Like I said, keep up the great work. I've enjoyed watching your teams when I get a chance to watch your teams. It's been a great story, and I want people to know about the story of how you built this program. Good luck here in conference play the rest of the way, and thanks for telling us the story of the program here on In the Circle on D1 Softball.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for letting me shine a light on Wofford softball. It's a special place.